America has voted, and if the internet can be trusted, and we know that it can, America's favorite holiday is, drum roll, Christmas. This is America's favorite holiday. Now, I'm all in on that. I love the Christmas season. I love this week of the year, this season of the year. I think it's amazing. Now, what's interesting is when you ask America, why is this your favorite holiday of the year? You could really boil down the reason to sentimentality. There is something about the Christmas season that just grabs that sentimental place in our heart. Here's how one person described why they love Christmas so much. They said it this way: "It's my favorite holiday because I love the atmosphere and the feelings that Christmas brings. It's such a beautiful holiday with all the lights and all the trees. I love the craziness of Christmas. I love shopping and buying gifts. I love wrapping presents and being together with family. I've always felt," this person went on to say, "that around this time of year, everyone becomes a little nicer. Everyone becomes a little nicer as the warmth of all the beautiful holiday decorations softens their hearts and reminds them of times spent with friends and family." I mean, there it is, right? Just the sentimentality of this year. There are things like eggnog and Christmas trees and Christmas lights and gifts under the tree and nativity. I mean, there's just all of these things, and it's all amazing. It's the reason that Christmas is such a likable holiday. Now, the only problem is sentimentality is a far cry from how the Bible presents Christmas. The Bible does not present Christmas in sentimental terms. The Bible brings us to Christmas with brutal realism. That's how the Bible brings Christmas. When Isaiah predicts the coming of Jesus in Isaiah 9, the precursor to the prediction sounds like this: "The people were living in darkness." That's the precursor to Christmas. The people, these people, they're all in complete darkness. The backdrop of Christmas isn't eggnog and a Christmas tree, right? That's not the backdrop. The backdrop in the Bible for Christmas is utter darkness, complete human hopelessness. That's the backdrop of Christmas. From the Bible's perspective, Advent, or the Christmas season, Advent, the first coming of Jesus, it doesn't fit very well on the back of a Hallmark card. That's just not how the Bible sees Christmas. And the reason is because the Bible knows Advent, Christmas, starts in the dark. That's where Advent starts. Advent starts with a world under a curse. As C.S. Lewis says in the Chronicles of Narnia, it's a world that's always winter but never Christmas. Or as Paul says in Romans chapter 8, the world really has been subjected to futility. When you think about the Bible's storyline, here's the way the Bible tells the story. It starts in Genesis 1, where God creates our first parents, and he puts them in this beautiful garden. It was amazing. Everything they needed was right there in the garden. God himself was there. The Hebrew people had a word to describe life then in the Garden of Eden. It's this word shalom. Everything was as it should be. It was just the good life, a perfect life. That's what they had. But then our first parents rebelled against God. They ate that forbidden fruit. And with that first sin, the curse set into this world. Unstoppable evil was unleashed into the world. And by the time you get to the end of chapter 3, just 3 chapters into the Bible, the story of the Bible is 3 chapters old, and our first parents are now evicted from the Garden of Eden, and we find that life east of Eden, life outside the Garden of Eden, is less like a Hallmark movie and more like hell. Life east of Eden is full of frustration and loss and suffering and death and addiction and evil and injustice. If you just start reading forward in the story, you find that sin and suffering and evil stain every single page of the Bible. Genesis chapter 4, just a chapter beyond our parents being evicted from the garden, we read this. Cain spoke to his brother Abel, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. It's just one chapter later. This is just life east of Eden. In Genesis chapter 6, just a couple of chapters later, evil, this unstoppable force unleashed into the world, has sunk so deeply into God's good world that we read these words in Genesis 6. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. Now, one of the things I appreciate most about the Bible is the Bible does not ask us to stick our heads in the sand and to pretend like everything is awesome. That is not how the Bible works. Rather, the Bible lifts our eyes up and helps us see the world for what it is. The Bible gives us a realistic picture of our world, and here is what we learn about our world. Evil is everywhere present. Welcome to the world you live in, the world I live in. Evil is everywhere present. If you keep reading forward in the biblical story, you find war and murder and famine and slavery and genocide and greed and incest and abuse and drunkenness and betrayal and anger and loss and lying and devastation and rebellion and anarchy. It's just bad everywhere. You get to the book of Judges, and Judges might be the darkest book in the Bible. And the book of Judges describes the darkness this way. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And the Bible's commentary on us doing right in our own eyes is when we do right in our own, in our own eyes, it is actually dead wrong. And that wrong leads to a lot of death. That's what happens when we do right in our own eyes. The Bible, in just its bone-jarring sort of a way, rips through the sentimentality of the Christmas season. And rather than giving us sentimentality, the Bible offers us sobriety, the ability to see our world rightly. It presents to us a world in the inescapable shadow of Genesis 3. It presents to us a world that's been polluted by sin and evil. And in a lot of ways, I think it's important for us to receive this invitation from Advent. At the Christmas season, this is one of the first things that God looks at his people and invites him to do. He looks at them and says, would you not distance yourself from the darkness? But no, would you let Advent take you into the darkness? Would you let Advent be a moment where you stare at the darkness, where you take a long, lingering look at the darkness of this world? Fleming Rutledge, in her book on Advent, she said it this way: the meaning of Christmas. So what is Advent about? What is Christmas about? The meaning of Christmas, she says, is diminished to the vanishing point if we're not willing to take a fearless inventory of the darkness. Essentially, she is saying this: if we refuse to see the despair of the darkness around us, then we will not be able to see the hope and the beauty of the light. She's saying, first, you got to get to the darkness. First, you have to take that long, lingering look at the darkness. When's the last time you've done that? Just pause to consider the darkness of our world. When's the last time you've took that sort of a long, lingering look? In this dark world, a pastor friend of mine, he was mowing his yard, and he happened to look up just in time to see a truck in his neighbor's driveway backing up, with the driver completely unaware that his neighbor's 18-month-old son was behind his truck. There are just moments in this dark world that leave you speechless. In this dark world, this world under a curse that we live in, there's a brain tumor right now slowly stripping every bodily function from a friend of mine. We live in a dark world, a world where another friend of mine, her earliest memories consist of her stepdad violating and abusing her when she was very young. And now in her 40s, it's just the reoccurring nightmare that she deals with. East of Eden, we find evil and suffering of every kind. And the first thing Advent does is invite us to resist denial of the darkness to actually look at it, to stare at it, to linger there in that look of the darkness, to see our world as it really is. Last night, I just did a Google search for current news headlines. Here's the sort of stuff that came up. Death toll in attack on German Christmas market rises to 5 with more than 200 hurt. An Indiana man is sentenced to 130 years in prison for murdering 2 teenage girls. HIV is spiking in new hotspots. How the Assads used civil war to turn Syria into a narco state. Teenage accused in Wisconsin school shooting had a tumultuous family life, court documents show. Mangione charged with murder as an act of terrorism. Just the headlines of the day, right? And it's all showing us that we inhabit a world under a curse. And Advent's first invitation for us is not to stick our heads into the sand, no, but to stare at the darkness, to look into the darkness, to resist denial, and to look at our world as it actually is. It's interesting. When we all start life, we do so with some rose-colored glasses. We come out of the womb with the assumption that the world's an awesome place. And somewhere along the way, we are shaken out of those rose-colored glasses to see the world as it actually is. And one of the questions I always find intriguing to ask people is, when did that happen for you? What was the moment that took those rose-colored glasses off and you're like, oh, that's the way the world actually is. The world actually is under a curse. We actually are under the shadow of Genesis chapter 3. Oh, I see it now. When did that happen? And all of our stories are different, so it happens at different times and different situations. For some, it's some of those things that happened early in our childhood that just shook those glasses off of us. For others, it might be something like 9/11. That's a defining moment in a generation of people that just has a way of alerting us to, the world maybe is a little darker and more dangerous than I thought. For others, it's going to be some of our younger folks in the room. Maybe it's ISIS and the rise of ISIS and watching them behead people on camera. Maybe it's that sort of a thing. But for all of us, there's going to be a moment where we are shaken out of those rose-colored glasses and we begin to see, oh, that's the world that we inhabit. And Advent doesn't just invite us to stare into the darkness out there. It also invites us to stare at, to take a good, long, lingering look at the darkness that's in here. Listen to the way Jesus talks about the darkness in here. In Mark chapter 7, he says it this way. For from within, so in here, not just out there, but in here. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All of those words are just describing dark things. Now, where do those dark things come from? He says all of these evil things, all of these dark things, where do they come from? He says they come from within and they defile a person. So just see this. When Jesus is addressing our problem, I just want you to notice, he doesn't say, you know what your problem really is? Your problem is all of that stuff out there. All of that dark, stuff out there somewhere. That's not his diagnosis. He says, no, here's the problem. It's not just the darkness out there. It's the darkness right here in our hearts. It's that we have dark hearts. That's the problem. It's so easy to divide the world into here are the good people and here are the bad people. But here's the thing. The Bible just doesn't let you get away with doing that. The Bible's like, yeah, you're all kind of bad and dark-hearted. You all kind of fit into that bad category. East of Eden, it's not that winter just spread into the world out there. It's not how it works. No, according to the Bible, we all took a big cold breath of that winter air, and it came into us. The darkness is not just out there. The darkness is also in here. I don't know if you've ever done this, but this week I just had a moment of sobriety with the Lord where I sat down with the Lord and asked him, how have I contributed to the darkness of this world? How have I made the darkness of this world darker? How have I been a co-conspirator in the pollution of this world? Have you ever just asked the Lord to give you eyes to see that in your own life? Because it's so easy for us to be like, yep, I see how they're doing it. I see how, yep, that right there, they're doing it. But have you just asked the question, how have you contributed to the darkness? How have you unleashed evil into this world? How have you polluted this world? And as I sat with the Lord this week and asked that, my mind just instantly raced back to my teenage years and a moment of taking from another human being just with no regard for what it would cost them, inflicting damage upon their soul. And just thinking about that, I still feel an appropriate and right shame for that. When I look back at it, I see it for the evil that it was. It was terrible. It was wrong. It was damaging. It was taking God's good world and polluting it. It was being a co-conspirator with evil in the world. And who in here can hold up their hand claiming innocence in that? The Bible's answer is no one. No one can. The Bible's answer is we have all done those deeds of darkness. We've all contributed to making the darkness even darker. The darkness is not just out there, it's also in here. No Country for Old Men is a movie based on a book by Cormac McCarthy. And just as a warning, it is not for the faint of heart. It is a movie that deals with human depravity. It has you stare into the darkness for about 90 minutes. That's what you're doing. You're staring into the worst of this world for 90 minutes. It's giving you a sense of human hopelessness, of what it means for evil to be unleashed in this world and for evil to just be unstoppable in this world. That's what the movie is trying to give us a sense of. And years ago, I was talking to Caleb, my son. He was about 10 at the time. And I was just sort of giving him the high view of the story of this movie. And this is essentially what I told him. I'm like, okay, there's an antagonist. There's the bad guy in the movie. And his name is Anton Chigurh. That's the bad dude. And he, Chigurh, is like the personification of evil in the movie. He is evil unleashed. And he has a totally seared conscience. In one of the most uncomfortable scenes I've ever seen in a movie, he walks into this convenience store, and he decides if this owner of the store is going to live or die by flipping a coin. It is just the most awkward, terrible thing ever. I mean, this guy is just, he's crazy. And throughout the movie, he is just mowing people and places down, leaving this trail of devastation and death and suffering in his wake. And the movie's really meant to make us ask the question, is the world really like that? And the Bible's answer is, yeah, that's kind of what the world is like. It is a dark world. Unstoppable evil really has been unleashed, casting this long, dark shadow over the world. And at one point, Woody Harrelson, he plays the character who's going to come in and fix the problem. He's going to put an end to Anton Chigurh. So he comes, and by the way, he's going to do it in his own evil way. So he's going to do it by extending some darkness himself. But do you know how long he lasts in the movie? About 13 seconds. And so I'm telling Caleb this, and I'm telling him about Woody Harrelson's character, and he comes in his 13 seconds, and he's dead too, and it's over for him. And when I said that, Caleb looked back at me, and just him and his 10-year-old sort of a way looked back at me and said, "Dad, can anything stop unstoppable evil? Can anyone stop unstoppable evil?" And in a lot of ways, that is the question of Advent. That is what Christmas is trying to get you to ask. Is there anything that can stop unstoppable evil? Advent has us staring at the darkness, at the depths of human depravity and human hopelessness. It has us become fully aware of, left to ourselves, when we do right in our own eyes, it is going to lead to so much wrong, deadly wrong in our lives. And it gets us to the point, after we look at that human hopelessness, that darkness long enough, where we ask that question, can anything stop unstoppable evil? And thankfully, Advent doesn't leave us staring at the darkness forever. Because Advent shines into the darkness. That's what Advent does. It has us staring at the darkness, and then when we get full of that darkness, we see it for what it is. It sends a shaft of light right into the darkness. Here we are to John chapter 1, verse 1. This is John introducing to us the first coming of Jesus, Advent, the first Christmas, and here's how he introduces it. In the beginning was the Word. Right, he's just describing Jesus to us. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things were made through him, through Jesus. And without him was not anything made that was made. In Jesus was life, and the life was the light of men. And then verse 5, this is the phrase I want you to see this morning. The light, talking about Jesus, who in him was life, he is the light, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You know, there is a reason why God put this big bright star over that little manger in Bethlehem. There's a reason that he did that. That star put Advent, put the coming of Jesus, put Christmas in story form as that bright star lit up that dark night. That is, in a nutshell, Christmas. That is Christmas in story form. When you look at that light over that little manger, you are seeing Jesus. This is what he came to do. He came to be that bright light that has lit up the darkness. Advent, the Christmas season, is our yearly reminder that light shines in the darkness and darkness has not overcome it. That's what Advent is for, to remind you of that, to give you a long, lingering look at the darkness, and then to remind you someone has come to do something about that darkness. That is the purpose of Advent. I love how one pastor put it. He said, Christmas is the beachhead of God's campaign against sin and sadness, against darkness and death, against fear and frustration. So if you are sick and tired of sickness and sadness, if you are sick and tired of death and darkness, if you are sick and tired of fear and frustration, here is the good news. Advent is the beachhead of God's campaign to do away with all that stuff. That is what Advent is doing. This is what Jesus came to do. Christmas is our yearly reminder that unstoppable evil, it's going to be stopped. That sin and death do not get the last word. It's our yearly reminder that God has stepped into the wreckage of this world and that he has promised to fix this place. He has promised to straighten everything that's crooked. He has promised to light up every dark place in this world. That's what Advent is reminding us of. Now, I want to take a step back and ask the question, what kind of people does Christmas create? If this is in a nutshell, the essence, the meaning of Christmas, it's going to invite us to stare into the darkness, and then it's going to invite us to see this shaft of light that has pierced the darkness. What kind of people does Advent create? Let me give you two things. Two things it does to us. Two types of people that it creates. Number one, Christmas creates a people of hope. Of hope. It is depressing to watch the news, isn't it? I mean, it's just one bad thing after another because we live in a dark world. It's depressing to watch a movie like No Country for Old Men and what the news can do to you, or when you're seeing a picture or a story of human depravity, what it can do to us is sort of sink us into just a place of resignation. I guess this is just how the world is and how it's always going to be. I guess evil and sin and death and suffering, they're just going to swallow up everything in this world. When we kind of slip into that place of resignation, we just have a way of looking at the world and just like everything feels impossible. How could things ever change? It just feels impossible that it could. Now, welcome to the reason that we need Advent every single year of our life to show back up. Because we need reminders. I love how Fleming Rutledge, again in her book on Advent, talks about Advent. She says it this way: Advent is the moment when the impossibility of the human condition meets the possibility of God. I love that. That's what Advent is doing. Every Christmas, here's what you're being reminded of. The human condition is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. The human impossibility that you face, that I face every day of our life, when you watch the news, when you watch these sort of, the human impossibility is met with the possibility of God. That's what Advent is announcing to us. I love that story in Luke chapter 1 when the angel announces to Mary, a virgin, that she's pregnant. And Mary's like, listen, I kind of know how these things work, and I think you've got the wrong gal. And then the angel responds back to her and says this, for nothing will be impossible with God. For nothing will be impossible with God. Aren't you grateful we have a God like that? That nothing is impossible with our God. There's no problem too big for him to solve. There's no situation that's too bad for him to fix. There's plenty of things in this world that are going to be impossible for you. Impossible for me. There's going to be plenty of those things, but there's not a single thing in this world that is impossible for God. God can take a virgin like Mary and give her a son. God can enter into human history through the person of Jesus. God can bring Jesus out of the grave. Not even death is an impossibility for God. God can save rebels like us. He can forgive our sins. He can bring us into his family. He can adopt us. He can make us his own. He can make us his friends. God can actually stop unstoppable evil. Nothing is impossible with God. Christmas reminds us that although we can't, God can. God can. There's not a thing in your life today that's impossible for God. Not a single thing. The longer I live, the longer all of us live, really, the more likely it is that our view of life, how life works, will shrink down to human possibility. Here's how life works. You just kind of do what you can do. Here's how life works. Some things are possible, some things are not possible. Here's how life works. It's all kind of dependent upon your capacity and your gifts and your talents and all the things that you can do. It's the longer you live, the more likely you're going to fall into a way of seeing that works like that. But Christmas is designed to bring us back to childlikeness, to remind us that, yeah, we might not be able to, but God can. Church, followers of Jesus ought to be the happiest and most hopeful people on the planet. Why? Not because you can, but because God can. Because God can. And I just wonder how many of us need that encouragement, that fresh hope today that God can. You may not be able to, but God can. Where have you just slipped into a way of seeing the world that you just feel resigned to the darkness that is? You've just sort of given up in life. You've given up on that marriage. You've given up on that. Where have you slipped into a way of seeing that's like that, where your view of what's possible has shrunk down to just what's humanly possible? Maybe that is your marriage. Maybe it is your parenting. Maybe it is that strained relationship. Maybe it is that area where you have sought change for years of your life and you're still just in it, struggling. Maybe it's that area of addiction in you. Christmas reminds us that God can. Church, look at me. God can. It may be impossible with you, but God can. Christmas creates people of hope. And secondly, Christmas creates people of light. In John chapter 8, verse 12, Jesus is revealing some things about himself. And this is the way Jesus talks about himself in John chapter 8. He says it this way: I am the light of the world. So Jesus is saying, if you don't know who I am, here's one way for you to see me. I'm gonna disclose myself to you. I am the light of the world. But now here's what's interesting when you see the rest of the Bible. The light and the light shining in the darkness, it doesn't just stop with Jesus. So he goes on in John chapter 8 and says this: whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Now isn't that interesting? He's saying, I am the light of the world, but this light doesn't stop with me. I'm going to make a lot of little lights around here. I love that about Jesus. My favorite part of our Christmas Eve services happens at the end. Okay, so on Tuesday, we're going to meet here. You should totally be here. It's going to be a really great time. You should invite people when you come. It's going to be really wonderful on Tuesday. And here's how we're going to end the service. We're going to sing Silent Night together. And as we sing, here's what's going to happen. One big light is going to pass its light to everyone else in the room. And in just a matter of moments, that one light is going to spread and become many little lights across the room. And in 60 seconds, this room is going to go from completely dark to lit up. Completely dark to light, pushing back the darkness, pushing darkness out of that room. That's what's going to happen right here on Tuesday. It's this amazing image. And it's giving us imagery for the role of every single Christian. Every single follower of Jesus. This is what we do. Yes, Jesus calls himself light, right? He says, I am the light of the world, but he also calls someone else light. If you remember Jesus in Matthew 5, this is the way he says it. Church, my disciples, my followers, you are the light of the world. Who are you, church? You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and then see through those good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So we could maybe ask a couple of questions from that text. What is a Christian? From this text, we can maybe answer it like this. A Christian is a bright light in a dark world. That's what a Christian is. And then if that's who a Christian is, then what does a Christian do? We could answer it this way from that text. Here's what a Christian does. They let their light shine. Here's what a Christian does. They push back darkness in this world. That's what a Christian does. A Christian is a person who God has passed his light to them. Now his light is burning inside of them. It's lit them, and now they take that light, they let it shine. They push back the darkness. Church, this is what we do. Right? We push back darkness. We let our light shine. Now, how do we do that? How do we let our light shine? Well, there is 1,000 ways we could push back the darkness in this world. Most of us are about to gather with family this week, right? It's Christmas, so we're going to gather with some family, and if your family's normal, it's probably very dysfunctional. Right? That's how normal families kind of work, right? And which means you have got the ability this week to step into that dysfunction as the light of Jesus. That you get to step into that darkness and you get to push it back. Well, how do you do that? Well, you get to do that by being quick to forgive. You get to do that by showing up with the joy of Jesus, just ready to bless and encourage and pour out life upon the people in your family. You get to do that by overlooking small offenses. You get to carry light into the darkness of that dysfunction. How do we push back the darkness? Well, we can do that by valuing the vulnerable. A few days ago, I was holding a little baby that a couple in our church is fostering. And as I'm holding that little baby, I'm looking at his face and I'm just thinking, they're doing it. They're doing it. That they are pushing back the darkness as they're giving this little baby a safe place. They're doing it. We have a crew that every year they will take duffel bags. So if you want to grab a duffel bag out there, you should grab one and you should go fill it up. It's going to have all the necessary things for a person who's homeless in it, some essentials for them. You bring it back on Christmas Eve, and then they'll take those duffel bags, and on Christmas morning, you can even go with them on Christmas morning if you want. They've got all that information out there in the lobby. On Christmas morning, they're going to show up in downtown Fort Worth, and they are going to bless and encourage and give some necessities to some homeless folks in downtown Fort Worth. That's just pushing back the darkness. It's letting your light shine. It's taking light into dark places and letting light do what it does, is it dispels darkness. Every time you share Jesus with someone who doesn't know Jesus, you're pushing back the darkness. Every time you plead with the Lord in prayer for your city, for your neighborhood, for your school, you are pushing back the darkness. When you open up your heart and your home and you express hospitality, right? When you welcome others as God has welcomed you in Christ, you are pushing back the darkness. When we say no to sin, right? Here's a temptation. Here's pornography. When we say, no, I am not doing that. I am not saying yes to that. I'm going to say yes to Jesus, not that. We are pushing back the darkness every time we say no to sin and every time we say yes to Jesus. And this is what Advent, this is what Christmas is meant to produce. People of light, people who take that light and let it shine and push back the darkness. So here is the question I want to leave you just lingering over. How this Christmas season are you going to push back the darkness? Church, this is our world. It is dark and dreary. And you know, one thing about darkness is it's depressing. There's a reason why all those people in Seattle get depressed. Because darkness is depressing. It's because darkness is full of sorrow and sadness. And church, this room really does right now represent our city. It represents your neighborhood. It represents your workplace. It represents your school. This is the biblical picture of our world. And here's what's so amazing. It's just amazing how much hope just a little bit of light can bring. And church, Advent reminds you that you are called to be that light. That Jesus has passed his big light to you so that now you are one of his little lights. And as his light, we don't cover it up just to keep it to ourselves. No, God has made you a light so that you would then take that light all the way to the gates of hell. So that you would take that light and you would take it to the darkest places of despair on this planet. God has made you light so that you would let your light shine, that you would push back the darkness. And the question is, how is that going to happen for you? Where is God calling you to take that light into dark places? Church, you are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. So church, let your light shine. Would you bow with me? I want to give you just a moment here to allow the Lord to speak to you, to maybe answer that question for you. How are you going to let your light shine? How are you going to push back darkness this Christmas season? Or here we are at the brink of 2025, the next year. How is God calling you to push back darkness, to take that light into dark places and to let it shine there? At the end of that passage in John that we first heard read this morning, The saddest part of that passage is when the light shows up. It says that Jesus went to his own, and his own did not receive him. Here comes the light, but just people did not receive the light. And all the while, Jesus is giving them this invitation that anyone who receives me, anyone who believes in my name will become children of God. So friend, if you have not received the light, if you've not taken that light of Jesus into your own heart, may this be the Christmas that happens. That just even now you can say to God, I'm turning from my sin. I'm throwing my life onto Jesus. Will you save me? And God would just be so pleased, so glad to do that work today. So God, you are the light of the world. And because Jesus is in us, we are now the light of the world. So Father, would you fill our hearts with vision for how we can take that light to dark places? God, would you fill our hearts with vision for how we can push back the darkness? God, help us be light. God, and help that light do its work in this world, lighting up every dark place, bringing hope to every despairing place. God, would you help us do that? And it's in the good name of Jesus that we ask it. Amen.